So public health touches nearly all aspects of our world, as we're seeing daily right now. And so we conceived of the Public Health Plus series as a series of 7 monthly conversations that address the intersection of public health and other disciplines. So this is a series that's a project of the Career Development Committee of the Rollins Alumni Board. And I want to take a minute. One of the things we really want to do is generate conversation and connection. So if you'll take a minute, if you are interested in connecting, to put your LinkedIn in the chat, that will encourage this group to form connections and facilitate conversations outside of this webinar. And you also have, as Diego mentioned, a chance to chat after. It's no pressure, but it's kind of a fun time after the conversation to be able to meet people and talk about some of the stuff we've heard. Okay, I am now going to introduce our two speakers. First is our facilitator, Elizabeth Sprouse. She is the founder of Double Lantern Informatics and also teaches at Rollins in the EMPH program. Double Lantern Informatics collaborates with clinical and public health clients to provide informatics solutions and then help them build capacity moving forward. And Elizabeth will be facilitating the conversation today. We're dropping 2 links for her into the chat. One is for Double Lantern Informatics, so you can learn more about her company. And another one is for a fundraising opportunity that Elizabeth is going to just mention briefly.
Great. Thank you, Megan. I'm so excited to be here today. Yep, the first link is to my website, and then the second is I'm going to be that person that plugs their fundraising when they're on a webinar. So I'm currently participating in a campaign for the Public Health Preparedness and Research Fund over at Rollins, and this goes to support urgent public health research and pandemic response efforts. So we're throwing the link in there if you are so inclined just to check it out and share it with your network so we can continue to fight not just COVID, but other illnesses and conditions that will arise so that we can be prepared going forward in our responses. So that's my last plug for a fundraiser that I'll do, I promise.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, and our speaker is Lorena Molina-Irizarry. She's the Director of Operations at the Census Open Innovation Lab, or COIL. COIL brings together technologists, government, and communities through open technology collaboration to tap into the power of open data for good. And I'm super excited to sit back and listen to this conversation because these two speakers have a lot to say. I'll leave it at that. Thank you both.
Thanks for having us.
Great. All right, Megan, so I'm gonna hop right on in with Lorena. Really excited to have this conversation with you. It's been a lot of fun preparing for this event, and I hope that everybody who's joined in today, it looks like we've got more than 45 folks on, will get a lot from it and learn about what you do and some of the things that they might be able to participate in as well. So let's go ahead and hop right on in. Can you tell us about your current position with the Opportunity Project?
Absolutely. So everyone, I'm Lorena Molina-Irizarry. I serve as a Director of Operations with the Census Open Innovation Labs, and we are an innovation hub within the United States Census Bureau, which is, as hopefully you responded to the 2020 census or are familiar with some of our work, and it's within the Department of Commerce. So within the Census Open Innovation Labs, we really look at understanding how co-designing and creating with others outside of our own walls really helps in pushing innovation forward and ideas, and really putting, in the context of this conversation, data in the hands of people and technologists themselves. So we really look at what are some of the most creative and innovative ways that not only we're leveraging technology, digital solutions, but also co-creating with the public, communities, and industry at large.
Great, thanks. So it really sounds like it's harnessing the power of data and the backings of different departments in order to, and private industry, to bring about innovations that can foster change. Would you say that that's a good way to kind of sum it up?
Absolutely. And certainly I would focus on the aspect of open innovation, which is a term that's, used to promote in the information age a mindset towards innovation that runs, counter to kind of the traditional research and development siloed mentality where you're kind of looking inward and trying to develop solutions within your own network. And what we do is really look outside of our own walls. It's looking at industry, looking at communities themselves, looking at what technologists are doing, what are some of the challenges that we need to solve, where government has vast amount of data for, and data that could be put in the hands of people to actually solve for really important problems, specifically problems of and challenges of public interest. So certainly data is at the core of that, but cross-sector collaboration is certainly the essence of the work that we do at COIL.
Great. And so within that, in your current role then, so does that actually mean you get to, lead the charge on all of the efforts behind the Opportunity Project?
So yeah, we have a small but mighty team that has been just critical and essential because we do, of course, a lot of partner and stakeholder engagement, but we also facilitate our sprint process, which we're going to get into a little bit more later in the conversation. But essentially, what we're trying to do is like lead this effort from within the federal sector on how we can actually work, with others to create change, create sustainable change at that. So certainly leading this effort from within the Bureau, I think for most people, it wouldn't necessarily be front and center that government is pushing these type of innovation approaches, but there's certainly a lot of great work happening across the federal space and other agencies like HHS and VA and Veteran Affairs and others, where we're really looking at this type of model of open innovation is serving not only the best interests of the citizens, because at the end of the day, federal government serves the taxpayers and the communities themselves, but also looking at how we can push, the overarching vision and mission of what all of our agencies collectively are trying to accomplish. So we work with not only across the industry and communities, but across the federal space at large.
Great. So moving of those change, harnessing open innovation sounds like a lot of work and important work, but is there a particular framework that you all rely on? What guides your approach to get this going?
Absolutely, that's a really great question. So I think one of the key differences or maybe comparisons we're comparing to private industry is that there's different types of innovation labs. Some are more disruptive in nature where you're looking at new business models, thinking about what are the gaps in knowledge that you would have a good value proposition to change how the work is happening, or whether it's in technology or whether it's like in people and processes, right? And what you're delivering as the output of that might be a new product, might be exploring new markets. But that's in kind of the corporate world. We also, see rapid innovation labs, which are thinking more about implementing agile, approaches to the work and kind of iterating and doing it at a rapid speed, where innovation really is centered on the speed and can bring a competitive advantage. In the case of open innovation, which is kind of the framework that we use, also called like a co-creation lab, if you will, and an innovation culture lab, aims really at the mindset of cooperation, and moving away from those silos, encouraging that cross collaboration. Could be both internal and could be external. So one is creating the culture for innovation within our own organization, but also thinking outside of our own walls. So thinking about what are the partners, what are the networks, what are the type of stakeholders that we already have, working with us, whether it's the Census Bureau, whether it's any other organization, and thinking about the types of tools in our toolbox that we have. So for example, we have 5 overarching pillars to our open innovation work that include crowdsourcing, also known as citizen science, But crowdsourcing really is looking at, opening this call out to the public, whether it's to the public or to a particular industry, and having large groups of individuals really work with you and kind of co-create. Whether it's through challenges, that's another approach. Prize and competitions and challenges are a really great way to engage stakeholders. As you would imagine, being a federal agency and being a government entity, there are a lot of barriers and maybe red tape that could be placed in the federal sector of how much information is shared or how open this process is. But I think these approaches to open innovation, like prizes and competitions, challenges, there are authorities in place that government can leverage to actually engage stakeholders and customers outside of the federal government. Also looking at open data collaboration, that's another pillar where we share and explore and analyze publicly available data sets, and that's the core of the Opportunity Project. And really engaging in open dialogue and idea generation. So idea generation is a huge pillar. Many of you might hear the terms human-centered design, design thinking, user-centered methods. All of this, it's really kind of in that same pillar of idea generation and essentially working with stakeholders, whether internal to government or outside. In our case, of course, we look at anybody that wants to, one, focus on technology and digital and bringing in data to solve for problems. And we do this by way of the Opportunity Project, but we also have a lot of user engagement workshops. We have community and tech workshops that really focus on this idea generation, co-creation, and really honing in on human-centered design as a tool for actually getting thoughts of other people that might be part of that conversation or might not be. And one of the key things in kind of our framework and the pillars that we really focus on to do our work is knowing that all stakeholders, regardless of the industry, regardless if you're coming from a startup or you're a student in a university or if you're an entrepreneur, big tech or big corporations, government, and even community organizations, of course. So the third sector or social sector is hugely important in this conversation as well. The one thing that brings us together is that everybody's trying to solve the same problems. When you think about the environment, when you think about healthcare, when you think about transportation, workforce issues, all of these issues, every single industry and sector is trying to solve for certain problems that are not unique to a particular sector. So you have government operating in a silo, industry operating in a silo, and then the third sector, nonprofit sector, also trying to solve for these really big challenges that we face as a nation. And the idea is to come together and have, conversations about this, and through our, facilitated sprint model, we have a very facilitated format to make this happen. So it's not just discussions and conversation, and I'm sure we're going to get into that a little bit later. But the idea here is we're all trying to solve for the same problems, and we can't do it in a siloed manner, and having private sector, government, and communities trying to solve for this. So our pillars really help us, focus on those approaches like human-centered design or design thinking, and doing prices and challenges and kind of crowdsourcing to make that happen.
Great. So before we hop into like the heart of the data sets and the different types of projects that have come out of the Opportunity Project, you had mentioned the sprint process. Can you talk for a few minutes to set the stage for everyone about a couple things? The challenges that you all set up and how you come up with them, and then the teams that come together typically in order to work through the sprint process. So what does that involve? Because not knowing the mix of folks, I'm looking at the participant screen, I'm sure we've got a lot of data scientists. We may have folks who aren't involved in data at all, so that they can understand that in the sprint process, there's not just data scientist roles, there's myriad opportunities for people to contribute to these different challenges.
Absolutely. So just to put a finer point on how the Opportunity Project works. So the Opportunity Project is a 12 to 14 week technology development sprint. So we bring in technologists, communities, governments together to help solve these key challenges. And we do that in as an agile development sprint where we start with user research, and then we build onto data exploration. We curate sets of data and data experts from across the federal government space, from different agencies. If we're talking about the environment, we have folks from EPA. If we're talking about healthcare, we have folks from HHS, for example, Health and Human Services. So essentially is identifying what are these data sets that are tying into some of the common themes or problem spaces, which I'm going to put a finer point on in a bit. And not only saying, hey, here's, vast amounts of data, open data that government has, is actually identify who are the subject matter experts, who are these data experts that really can speak to the data that's available. So we essentially go through this 12 to 14 week development sprint. Again, it starts with user research. We give maybe 2 or 3 weeks for that cycle. We connect them and pair them with different people in different roles. Then we go into data exploration, and then we have a series of demos, concept pitches, and then an alpha demo, which is kind of a first idea of what a product or a digital solution would be for that problem. And then we go into kind of MVP, which is a minimum viable product. And then at the end of that, we launch everything with our demo day, which this year is going to be demo week. And hopefully I can share more information on that before we wrap up. And the way that we identify these challenges is that we work with other federal agencies to think about data-driven innovation in different spaces. So it could be environmental challenges, it could be around economic development, it could be around government spending and data around government spending, and it could be around COVID or opioids, anything healthcare related, civics education. So we have touched on all of these topics throughout the last 4 years. So the Opportunity Project started in 2016 under the Obama White House as a way of addressing kind of a federal government-wide strategy of, we can't do this alone. We have to work with industry and we have to work across communities to solve for these really big problems, because these are not problems that the federal government in and of itself has to solve. This is a nationwide issue, whether it is disaster response or, supporting recently resettled refugees. All of these topics we essentially work, we have an open call that's open to federal agencies and also publicly. And we just receive a lot of just incoming ideas about what some of these problems and problem spaces and challenges are. And we essentially narrow those down. So we have commitment from the highest level of other agencies and identify, if they can put a team together to support it, then we essentially roll that into our sprint for any particular year. In the last 4 years, we usually run between usually 2 sprints a year. This year, which is our 5th year of the Opportunity Project, we ran 4 sprints and our first ever university sprint as well. So it's really exciting this time around. So essentially the different roles, you can think about it as assembling a coalition of experts to support all the participants in this process. And the way how we go about it, and you specifically asked about the different roles in the Opportunity Project, is we have 5 major roles. So we have the agency leads and the policy experts on these issues, right? So we identify that priority issue, whatever the case is. This year, we touch on environmental challenges and challenges in the built environment. And we essentially identify where there are relevant data sets, open data sets, so open source data that can actually provide or be useful to provide a solution for any particular challenge. So the agency leads and the policy experts really provide feedback to the participants and the tech teams throughout the sprint process, and they share their expertise on policy or the national context for that particular problem. Just to pull a very concrete example from this year, we're working with EPA on a problem statement around the effect of transportation emissions on air quality. So that's a very specific problem space, right? Problem area. So we have subject matter experts from across government and that understand the data, what data is available. And they're available to answer questions and provide feedback throughout the sprint process. The second role, what we call a tech team. So tech teams.
Oh, I can't hear you. Broke up a little bit.
Okay.
Try again.
Can you hear me better now?
Hopefully it's not only.
This is just you, because I hear her.
Okay, you do. Okay, I hear you, Diego. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No problem at all. And if you can drop in the chat if anyone else can't hear me. So the second role, tech team. So these are the leads in actually developing a digital solution. So they design and build a user-centered digital tool at the end of the 12-week sprint. They own and maintain the products post-sprint, and essentially ensure that it reaches the end user once the product is developed. And tech teams can come from, it could be a small university team, it could be a lean startup, it could be a company like Google or Redfin. We've worked with really anyone in the space, you name it. I have more information, and hopefully I can share a deck afterwards with a little bit more information. But again, any team or individual that has a technology build capacity and can actually develop, whether it is a mapping tool, a website, a web app, whatever it is, as long as it's digital in nature and uses data, open data. The third role are the user advocates, and this is actually just critical for the opportunity project success. So user advocates represent the end users and ensure that the tools really meet the needs of those target communities. So throughout the problem statement creation, we identify what are the data sets available to solve for that challenge, and who is the target audience? Who is intended to utilize this solution or to essentially help solve the problem for. So those audiences, we identify whether they're individual community members, local state government, they could be nonprofit organizations, really anyone that would be a potential end user for that problem space. They have to be part of the process. So when we talk about human-centered design and when we talk about building technology with the end user in mind, they have to be part of the conversation. And I think that's one of the things that is mostly overlooked in the technology space at large is if you build with, not for. So the user advocate is a critical role in the process. And then lastly, the last two roles are data stewards. So these are the subject matter experts on the data side. So they help identify relevant data sets. They help the tech teams access and use the data and provide feedback to the teams, through along the sprint process. And finally, product advisors. So this is a role that we actually incorporated into the opportunity project process. I want to say maybe 2 years ago. And of course, we practice what we preach and we eat our own dog food. So we do a lot of research after the fact with the sprint participants, and we want to learn how was their experience. And one of the things that came up, over and over again was we need folks that really understand, go-to-market strategies and product management and understanding kind of these products after the fact. So it's not about building a tool and then just putting it up on a website. It's about what are the partner networks that you have available? What is your communication strategy, storytelling? How do you actually get these tools in the hands of people at the end of the day? So the products advisor help with that strategy throughout the sprint process. And those are the 5 major roles within TOP. That was my long answer to your question.
No, that was great. And hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm having a little bit of hard time with my app. Okay, so I switched to speaker. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. One of the things that I loved on that was early in that answer when you referred to coalition of experts. I think that was really great. And one thing for the folks who are on the line, I want to make sure that they heard was that the product team owns the product. I think that that's something just to doubly emphasize. The Census Bureau does not own the solutions that are developed. So Lorena had mentioned that. So let's do this. Let's talk about some of the curated data sets that are available to the teams. And I think you want to show a screen as well. I think folks would find it really interesting to see what's actually available out there.
All right, so I went ahead and share my screen. Let me know if you can see it. This is actually the products page on our website, but I'm gonna go all the way up. And for you guys, and maybe Diego, you can drop on the chat, our website is opportunity.census.gov. Open this up a bit so I can see the menu.
Yeah, I'll share it again. No worries.
Yeah. So here are our data sets page. So we launched a data hub, which are curated data sets from across federal government that are used by the Opportunity Project. But again, this is open source, so anybody could take a look. And what we learned through our process and the different sprints that we have carried on is that it's really challenging for anyone in the public, whether you're a technologist or just an individual like data consumer or a power data user, to find data sets that relate to the same common theme or topic. It really doesn't exist within the federal space. So we created this data hub as part of the Opportunity Project to really match all the data sets or most of the data sets available for that would help solve for a particular problem space together. So I'm just gonna click on, and these are not all of the ones that we've worked with in the past, but the data hub in itself is a new product that we launched last year, and we continue to refine and build. So we worked on workforce challenges last year. And then this year we built these 3 modules that are about the natural environment, built environment, and COVID, which I want to put a plug for. We have a partnership with the American Statistical Association and launched a challenge around helping families, business, and communities respond to COVID. So this module right here has all data sets that will be helpful or relevant for COVID-19. But I'm going to pull up just this one as an example, Natural Environment Sprint, which has data around pollution, agriculture, transportation, and NAIC data, which is aerial imagery from USDA. So here, as you can see, we have not only the types of data available, and it takes you to the website, whether it's an API or whether it is static data sets. Some of them are more structured than others, and that's another challenge. Certainly that data available throughout government and different agencies that put out data are in different formats, different modes. Some of it you need to work and clean it up a little bit more before actually using it and ingesting it in a digital solution or product. But some, we have at Census more than 20 different APIs. So these are just, as you can see, I'm just going to continue to scroll here. So you can see the vast amount of data that we have from whom. So we have even from outside of government, like the Plastics Industry Association, data on plastics, data from the steel industry, anything really that's glass resource locator. So here you can see there's just a wealth of access to different data sets, but they all tie to that one particular theme. And of course, tracking back to the different problem statements. One key thing here is usually when you think about government, you send an email, you think it's going to a black hole, and if you ever get a response or think you might get a response, you could actually talk to the data expert. Here, we're actually giving you the information of that data expert, and you can contact them directly. So the owners of these data are available, and we recruit them into the sprint process. And the list goes on and on, so you can keep scrolling here. And you can filter by these different topics as well. Oh, I went to the wrong one. For COVID, for example, I'm going to just pull this one right here. And we will continue to build upon this data hub as we, of course, move further along with TOP and TOP-X, which I also wanted to mention, which is our open source toolkit for other federal agencies to be able to run the Opportunity Project on their own. So here, for example, I'm going to put COVID-19 data. So we have demographic data, economic data, health data, education, and employment. A lot of this data is from the Census Bureau. So we have American Community Survey, 1-year estimates, 5-year estimates. There's just a wealth of data available, and then the contact of each data expert as well. So you click on here and you can actually send an email directly to that data owner. we have supplemental data sets from, Centers for Disease Control, right? Social Vulnerability Index. There's also data around the pulse surveys that Census has done, which include how COVID is impacting small businesses and households. So both demographic and economic data as well. So this data hub is, again, a new product of the Opportunity Project. And before then, we really just curated the data, and it was, a bit more rudimentary. We had, a spreadsheet or a collection of data in a document that we actually share with the participants. And, throughout the years, we really identified the need for this product of a curated data hub. And we'll continue to iterate, but I encourage anyone to go here and kind of check it out and explore the different data sets available.
That's great and very cool. So seeing that data though, I'm really interested in some of the example projects that have come out of using that data. So can you talk us through some examples and maybe some lessons learned? I think we'd really love to hear about some of the tools that were built to solve problems in particular with public health.
Absolutely. So I'll share, let's see, I'll start with sharing a bit about, and I'm not going to showcase all of them. I think I'm going to just show two, the actual, demo of the tool, or at least the website. But for example, in past years, actually last year, we touched on a problem statement around the opioids crisis. And we had George Mason University here in DC, they participated, and they built a tool that was called PreFlow, which identifies the flow of opioids prescriptions throughout the nation. So that's one example. They use CDC data, they use census demographic data as well to build a tool. Another one that comes to mind was Esri, the GIS technology company. They partner with a company called Civiscape, an organization, and they use census data along with local New York city incident data, open data, in order to build it was a predictive analytics tool which could identify the likelihood of where and when an opioids overdose will take place. So that would help emergency response officials and safety personnel understand and kind of map out and geolocate these areas that are more propense for an opioids overdose to happen. So as you can see, that actually brings up the topic of partnerships and collaborating with local and state officials in government and even communities to understand really from a community-based lens of how this really impacts the communities across the board. And other examples.
Are they, are those two examples, are those out in like active use once they develop them?
They are. These two particularly are not on our website. We just have a subset of them because up until now we have 140 plus solutions that have been built through the process. So we have probably like half of them on our website. But the two that I'm going to show next are available.
Great.
So it's I'm going to show this one. Not, let's see if I can show my screen again. And this is pulling from another deck, so I'm not gonna do a full view of the tool, but I certainly wanna share kind of a screenshot of it. So this example is actually, it's built in ArcGIS and it was built by Esri. And it's an insights tool that essentially shows, and there's a lot more to this, and I definitely, oops, still one loading, encourage you to go to the site. I can drop the link. So this was a tool that was created to predict where opioid emergencies are likely to occur in different geographic areas. So of course, helping the public at large, but also health officials, and kind of understanding, like and when I drop this, you'll take a look. You'll see there's different ways of presenting and visualizing the data, and you can kind of go down to the census tract level even. So it's a geospatially enabled data set to help visualize and analyze the breadth of the opioids problem across the country. and also help disseminate information about the importance of this issue that really affects a lot of people nationwide. So for this one, not only Census Bureau data, but also local emergency response data. And I'm gonna try to pull up here the actual site. Maybe that would be helpful. And then I have another last example. Let's see. All right. I'm not sure what I had all these tabs open.
It's how it works.
Here it is.
Like
okay.
the leaf blower outside right now.
I just can't find the tab in my desktop right now because I just had it up. But anyway, I can drop the link later on in the chat. And then the last one, and maybe I can just do this real quick, is this. I think she was at the time maybe 14 years old. This girl that actually had Lyme disease, she invented an app that tracks tick outbreaks. And I'm going to show that one here. So this one is called a tick tracker app, and she presented actually at our demo day last year at the Census Bureau. So Olivia got bit by a tick when she was, I think, about 7. And you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
And she was 13 years old. She invented this app because she had Lyme disease, and she didn't really find that there was a lot of information in terms of geographically where tick outbreaks would be occurring, and to help families and communities understand not only the risks of the tick-borne illness, but also understand like what communities are predisposed. If there's a tick outbreak, there was nowhere to report it to, except for, of course, CDC data or healthcare data, which really it's not as open and consumable and accessible. So this app is a clear example of something that is out there. It was continued to be built throughout the Opportunity Project and ingesting additional data. And the app helps users actually report and track ticks in real time. So this is also a clear example of a tool that it's downloadable, you know, it's available on iOS and Android. And there is a storytelling behind it. So some of the tools, I do want to mention this from the material level. The requirement from our team as far as the Opportunity Project goes, I'm going to pull here some of the tools. And you can filter by topic. So for example, if you want to just pick your health, or even let's add opioids. Some of these tools, some of these tools have different material levels. So at the end of the sprint, what our requirement is to have an actual MVP of a product that is usable and it works and it's out there and like it's publicly available. But when teams participate in the Opportunity Project, you know, they might use it as a pilot phase. They can start a product from scratch. They can think about a digital solution based on addressing the problem statement and build it from scratch, which of course is not going to have the maturity of a product that maybe was built by Redfin, for example, which has been a participant of ours in the past, where they built you know, a tool that already is in existence and they're just adding or, you know, intake more data sets or additional data sets at maybe a more granular level, or thinking about different geographies to incorporate if we're talking about demographic data or other features, for example. So it really does vary through our process where either you bring a tool that's already existent in the market, like the case of Redfin, and I'm trying to pull back the tab because I had these 4 examples that I could readily show for the difference and kind of the comparison of different tools and the maturity level of them. So for example, we had Cisco built a tool that was in response to understanding or showcasing to millennials the power of data and how they could ingest different data sets to address the disasters and response. And they built a game. So they went the route of gamification, and you had to pick a superhero in the city of San Francisco to put out a fire. And as you went through the game, essentially, you picked out different data sets that will help you solve the challenge. In the case of Redfin, for example, they had the walk score, which is an indicator they already had, and they built opportunity score, which essentially gives the user where there are different job opportunities available at 30-minute radios, either walking or using public transportation, so without using a car from your address. So that way, in terms of looking at new job markets or where you would move and what types of job opportunities are available, you would be able to see that in a heat map and kind of interact with that data. Another example was around local addressing, standardizing local addressing for disaster response and recovery efforts. And a tool was built by the team from Puerto Rico, actually, that really helped standardize the local addressing data so that when emergency respondents came, whether it's FEMA or local emergency respondents, they had a standardized way to actually search for addresses and geolocate where, communities are that might not be connected or had lost, broadband connection. So those are just real quick examples, not only from a public health perspective, but also at large on how bringing different stakeholders together and really understanding the end user in that community that you're serving as part of the build process, as part of creating technology that is actually usable for the public has to be part of that conversation.
So I think that leads into, there was a question in the chat. So people being part of the conversation, I think this is a natural transition. I want to ask this. It's from Margaret Horton in the chat. And she said, what recommendations do you have for using citizen science? So kind of building on the same thing that you said, our program is hoping to leverage purple air monitors, et cetera, but we sometimes get pushback from our environmental regulatory partners. So talk a little bit more about citizen science in general and how it can be harnessed to bring about change.
And just to clarify, I think this is Margaret Horton, right? That made the question.
Yes.
Are you in the local state government or level?
Hi, this is Margaret. I'm at a state health department in Colorado.
Got it. So it's interesting, your question, because it really depends on the buying that's already, how much investment in innovation and technology a particular state or community already has, vested to work on these kind of innovation programs. Citizen science is really a way for engaging the public in solving, particular challenges and problems and kind of harnessing the power of, the power of the crowd and collective ideas. Specific to your what you're trying to accomplish with purple air monitors, I don't have a lot of background and information on that. But I think starting with what are the authorities that are in place or the policies in place that give you the authority to actually do this. At a federal level, there are, legal authorities that provide for agencies as a tool to actually implement crowdsourcing and citizen science as a way to engage the public. So certainly, at least at the federal level, there has to be some sort of written policy that is essentially sanctions a federal government agency going outside of the regular structure of what would otherwise be considered, a formal advisory committee or these groups of oversight really that are meant to represent different types of organizations, different type of community stakeholders. Again, like in the case of a national advisory committee, maybe your state has something in place that's similar, but it has very rigid and structured requirements on how often do you actually get to reach out to the public to inquire, or how you're collecting data from the public as ideas. And it's a pretty rigorous process to capture that information. It has to be documented. you know, you have to respond within X amount of days, 30 days. So we cut through all of that with the different authorities that are in place. And I think, I don't want to speak out of, you know, my knowledge area, but it is possible that you can actually refer to and point to federal level national authorities that would open the door and kind of open up that runway for you to explore how do you leverage those and apply at a local level and at a state level. But certainly at a state and local level, it might be you know, a conversation that has to happen locally to actually understand how government is already doing this with and engaging communities and engaging the public. I do think if you reference success stories and use cases that are that, you know, have essentially proved successful in the past through the federal authority of crowdsourcing, that might be applicable at a local level. But again, I am interested in looking at that more and hopefully can get back to you with more information. But I understand where the regulatory partners might have a concern for actually open up that conversation to the public at large. But you can do it by way of different programs like challenges, again, and competitions, where you actually seeking input and information from the public in creative ways, maybe holding different community conversations and sessions that are not a formal way of gathering that feedback officially from the state, from government, right? Because you have then the systems of record notice, and you have like PRA, the Paperwork Reduction Act, and you have all these policies in place of how do you capture data and save that data, especially if it pertains to personal identifiable information or PII, and how you are you know, thinking about security and privacy of that information that you collect and from who it's coming. Again, if it has PII in it, there are regulations, of course. And again, I think it definitely varies state by state, but definitely looking at the overarching, if you Google GAO, the General Accountability Office at a federal level, there are best practices and policies laid out for government to be able to leverage these tools like citizen science and crowdsourcing.
You know, it was before I had talked to you, even having worked in data, I was not aware of the concept of citizen science. And I think it's really interesting because obviously we know that, you know, things get opened up for public commenting and there's public forums, but what, you know, talk about engaging stakeholders. I think that that's fascinating, and then allows people to be involved, you know, regardless of if it's a part of what they do every single day. So that's really interesting. There's another question in the chat I wanted to ask you. I have a couple more, but just want to make sure I give other people the platform too. As this is from Anjali, hopefully I pronounced that right. As a student who is just edging into this world, how do I delve into and shape my learning to get on board with health analytics? That's a great question.
That is a great question. I'm not sure that I'm the best person to address that, but certainly the first thing that comes to mind is there are, you know, groups out there. The first thing that comes to mind are communities of practice and groups, meetups, and groups like Coding It Forward and Code for America. There are a lot of brigades, and I don't know if you're familiar with these groups, but Code for America, Coding It Forward. There are certain groups that essentially focus on a volunteer capacity on several issues, but specific. I think you specifically mentioned environmental analytics, and as a student, how do you get involved?
Health analytics.
Health analytics.
Health. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know that I have a great answer to that question, but certainly as a student, there is a lot of work happening in this space that may be going to you know, through your own institution, or thinking about partnerships that are already established with nonprofits, research institutions, foundations, even philanthropy, that are actually setting a space for that collaboration to happen, and like understanding what is the ecosystem in your area looking like if you're thinking about it more locally and how to get involved. Yeah, I don't know that I have a great answer to that, but Elizabeth, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'll add a little bit to that because I work in the clinical informatics space. So I would say, one, if you're getting some of that coursework behind you, so you're actually gaining that training in this area, that's going to help you. And then you're going to want to probably build a little bit of a portfolio. So some of the things Lorena mentioned of, going out and looking at maybe some of like the volunteer opportunities. So you could, build on your skills and have some examples of work products that would then give you an opportunity to break into maybe a healthcare system that's going to definitely have a data analytics and department, and then build your career up that way. That might be a good way to go. There's another question from Hannah Lee, and Hannah, nope, no one has asked this yet, so you're not late to the party. Can you discuss a bit about issues of reliability in open source data?
That's a really great question. And I think it definitely varies on the type of data that you're looking at. So it's not necessarily one size fits all. The first thing that comes to mind is the timeliness of the data and how well it might be curated. So one of the things that we've seen come up through the Opportunity Project is there are data sets that people are looking forward to, explore and play around with, and it just doesn't exist sometimes, or is not open data. In essence, it's data that's available but might be proprietary data. As far as open source data, and this definitely varies if it's coming from a national level, kind of a federal level, local level. It's hard to get that data to a place in a timely manner where it's actually real-time data. And that's one of the things that we've seen come through the Opportunity Project. Specific, examples. We did an effort around veteran workforce and veteran homelessness, and there are, and the job types that are available, and kind of ingesting the data. And even though part of that data is open data, and we have it from VA and other, Bureau of Labor Statistics and even census data, it might not be at the same level of granularity. It might be, if you're looking at a particular state, then we have to work with the state agencies or local communities to really get that data in the same format or in the same structure. Or even if it's longitudinal data, for example, it might not be collected or started being collected maybe 5 years ago. Then you want to do a comparison with another, geography or location or state that might have been collecting the data for longer, or the reverse, right? So I think in terms of the reliability of the data, it's really working with that, at least on our end, working with subject matter experts that can actually address those questions. But it also varies depending on, if you're looking at national level data, or if you're looking at very hyper local, maybe census tract data, and how the data is collected and presented. It might be accessible, but it might not be useful. So those are some of the things that we look into trying to kind of uncover through the Opportunity Project, because it's not the same thing of just having the data out there on a website or through an API, but it's not being maintained, or you can't really ask questions to a data expert around it. But that's a really broad question that you're asking, because of course, I think we need to hone in more on like the specific type of data and for what use. As far as the data that we have cured through the Data Hub, I know it aligns to specific problem spaces, if you will, or themes or topics. But again, if you're thinking about reliability of open source data at large, there's of course a lot to uncover there. But really great question. I hope that helped a bit.
Yeah, that was a great answer. So I know we're gonna break out into our breakout room soon, but I wanted to ask some fun questions as well. This covered a lot of great ways of, I think for everybody listening, if this is the type of something that you would want to be involved in, you absolutely check out the Opportunity Project website. Data sets that are available. I think it's great for teams that could come together, and student groups. Reminder, plug in for our students who are on the line that they have involved university sprints. But now I want to have like a quick hit hot topic questions to know you a little bit, Lorena, to build on when we break out as well. So here we go. What gets you up in the morning?
What a great question. So there's so much happening in the world right now, and it seems that everybody's focused on what's going on kind of around them and in the lives of others. I think enjoying the little things, and I don't want to get too philosophical or like existential, but I think one of the things that the global pandemic has given us, or at least me in my own household, is the time to enjoy the little things and really be present and getting to know myself and the people that I enjoy spending time with, and just being present. I think that's in these crazy times of uncertainty, I think our focus is just scattered. You know, we have our own life and kind of personal, you know, little ecosystem of things that we deal with on a day-to-day, and then this huge shift of you know, social structure and you know, the pandemic in and of itself, and it gets you thinking a lot of the small impact that you can have on a day-to-day, just with the people that you engage with now virtually. So I know that's a really broad answer, but really looking and starting with my own interactions and the people around me every day, I think making the best of that and doing those small little things and being present is really what drives me.
I think that's great. And so kind of in that same vein, what's next for you? You know, diving deeper into the Opportunity Project?
Well, actually, that's a really great question. I think there's kind of a micro and macro answer to that. We're now looking, a lot of the work that we've done through the Census Open Innovation Labs and with TOP is looking outside. It is working with, you know, it's external stakeholder engagement, is a lot of like engaging with communities, but we also, you know, turned a really critical milestone for the Census Bureau, which was executed on the 2020 census. And we're turning a lot of our own approach to innovation inward to our organization and standing up a new innovation team at the Bureau, where we're looking at kind of future-proofing some of our work and kind of understanding what the census looks like in 2030, and understanding how we can continue to work with, you know, all of our stakeholders, but also looking inward a little bit more and helping our own organization really building an ecosystem of innovation within the Census Bureau that goes, you know, way farther than just our team or the different teams that we have around the Bureau that are doing this cross-cutting, really engaging and fun work around the future of data and technology, and kind of digital implications of even how we collect data from the public in 10 years or 20 years. So that's specific to the work at hand right now. In the future, I've been in government for a while, almost, well, 10 years. So I'm certainly looking forward to continue this work outside of government and really get this approach in the hands of communities that really need it, whether it is through community work or, you know, working in the nonprofit sector, even in the private sector, and kind of seeing it from another angle. That would be really a goal for me in the future.
Okay. I think probably, I'm sure Diego's looking at the watch, that it's time to break out rooms. So let me ask one more, just tiny quick one, Diego. What's the best piece of advice you have received in your life? And everyone, I gave her this question earlier, so she did have, I'm not being terrible to her. She got to think about it.
That question really gave me pause, because I think I am blessed and surrounded with so many influential people, both in my kind of personal life and professional world. The best piece of advice I think I've ever gotten is to trust the perfect timing of things, just generally. I usually get in a space of maybe thinking a lot about the future and what's going to come up next and how I'm going to make this happen, and kind of when you think about your life plan and goals from a very long-term standpoint, 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, I'm not a person that plans out my life, you know, 5 years from now necessarily, but really trusting perfect timing, and things happen when they're supposed to and not sooner and not later. So the lessons come when you're ready for them, in a way. And like every trial and tribulation and maybe failure that you've had in the past really sets you up for that next thing. So there's always something to learn, and sometimes, you know, you feel stuck and you feel like you want to do something more, you want to help more, you want to be more impactful in the world, and you sometimes get a little bit kind of anxious of, you know, I want to accomplish so many things, and there's just you know, a limited amount of time. And I think just trusting that and opportunities come and sometimes we're just not ready to see them. And when we actually see them and they're aligned for you, I think trusting that perfect timing of when things happen when they're supposed to really gives me personally a lot of peace of mind. And I think that has been probably the best advice that I've been given.
I think that's great advice. I've loved this conversation with you. Thank you so much.